Good evening. Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Riza Diaz.
Tonight's big stories. Talks of a coup are circulating around the Senate once again, just 4 months since it changed leadership. Who's being rumored to replace Senate President Cheese Escudero this time?
Former Vice President Leni Robredo was put on the spot when her successor Sara Duterte pulled a surprise visit on her last week. Robredo spokesperson Attorney Barry Gutierrez now says it felt like a setup.
And U.S. President Joe Biden tells Quad leaders China is testing us in what was supposed to be closed-door discussions. We'll discuss this and other issues with Philippine Ambassador Babe Romualdez later in the program.
Is there a plot to oust Senate President Cheese Escudero? Well, just 4 months after he took over, rumors are swirling once again that there are attempts to replace the Senate leadership.
Senate President pro tempore Jinggoy Estrada's name has also come up once more as a replacement. Now remember, his name was also being thrown around a few months ago as a supposed replacement to former Senate President Mig Zubiri.
Now, one by one, senators have denied the speculation to push out Escudero. But where exactly could these rumors have come from? Mendoz Baños has the big story.
Only 4 months into his term as Senate President, Senator Cheese Escudero is already facing rumors of a possible coup. It is said that his replacement could be Senate President pro tempore Jinggoy Estrada, the second highest leader of the chamber. But Estrada quickly denied that he has any plans of taking over.
Hindi po totoo yan at wala po akong balak. Okay? Nagtataka ako, nagugulat ako dito sa mga kumakalat na mga usap-usapan na papalitan na raw yung ating Senate President. Wala po katotohanan yan.
Estrada insisted he doesn't know where the rumors of a plan to oust Escudero are coming from. But he admitted that he had heard about it a few weeks ago. The senator also said that no one has approached him to ask for his signature.
Hindi ako. Yan narinig ko, merong iba. Walang kumakausap, walang lumalapit sa akin.
May unrest ba among senators?
Wala naman. I think the majority of senators are very supportive of Senate President Cheese Escudero. No, I'm comfortable with the Senate President. The Senate President is doing a good job.
Most of the senators, he said, also support Escudero. Estrada's name had come up before when rumors first started swirling earlier this year that there was a haphazard plan to oust former Senate President Mig Zubiri. True enough, on May 20, Zubiri stepped down saying he was heartbroken and that he was pushed out because he didn't follow instructions. Escudero later on admitted it was him who initiated Zubiri's ouster. Senate President pro tempore Estrada admitted that it would not be good for the Senate to keep changing leadership. In fact, he said that under Senator Escudero's leadership, the Senate has been performing well. They have passed many bills that align with the administration's legislative agenda before going on break next week. Escudero meanwhile gave a brief response when asked by the media about the coup attempt against him.
Just go.
In a separate statement, Escudero laughed off the rumored coup against him. He says, "Why will I comment on mere rumors from unknown sources?" He added that he and other Senate officials will continue to serve as long as the majority wants them to. Senator Loren Legarda's name has also emerged as one of the possible candidates to replace Escudero as Senate President. In response, Legarda said that she had no knowledge of any coup plans and that they are focused on their work in the Senate. Another name mentioned in connection with the alleged ouster of Escudero is Senator Cynthia Villar. She also denied having any involvement in it. Senator Bato de la Rosa, who is part of the majority, was also asked if he knew about the coup plan. Coup attempts against SP Escudero, meron ba, sir?
Ginugulo yung buhay namin dito.
Kami.
Tahimik yung buhay namin dito.
So wala, sir? Walang nagpaikot, treso?
Tanungin mo sila kung sinong source niya.
For News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Moving on now, 7 individuals said to be cohorts of Alice Guo in the Pogo Hub in Tarlac have surrendered to authorities after a Pasig court issued warrants for their arrest. Some said they were merely used and made to sign documents. Laila Pangilinan has the details.
They are the 7 among the co-accused of dismissed Banban Tarlac Mayor Alice Guo in her qualified human trafficking case. The NBI will be presenting them before the Pasig City Regional Trial Court, which issued their warrants of arrest.
Sila ang lumalabas na mga responsible dun sa Hongsheng Incorporators at saka sa Sun Yuan Incorporators. Lahat ito ay mga masasabi natin na bogus corporation ni Alice Guo.
5 of them surrendered to NBI Central Luzon, while the 2 others surrendered to Task Force Bamban. Among them is Jamilyn Santos Cruz, president of the Pogo Hub Zun Yuan Technology in Bamban. She insists her company is not illegal, or at least it wasn't when she was still handling the papers.
Ang investment na po ito nung inalok po sa akin ay online gaming. For online gaming, opo. Ngayon po, nung ako po ay pumasok na dito, ito po ay legal because I myself go to PAGCOR and meet the officials of OGLD, Offshore Gaming License Department. So there's no way na sabihin na kami po ay bogus or ako ay bogus.
Apart from Santos Cruz, the others who surrendered were Rachel Carrion, Roderick Pujante, Juan Miguel Alpas, Rita Iturralde, Rowena Evangelista, and Thelma Laranan. Some of them claim they were merely used and that they decided to surrender in hopes of clearing their names.
Ginamit lang po kami dito po. Pinapirma po kami dito ni Jeremy Santos. Si Jeremy Santos po, asawa niya po si Patty Santos, Chief of Staff ni Mayora Alice Guo. Si Jeremy Santos, kapatid niya po to si Jamilyn Santos. Para malinis po yung pangalan po namin at takot na po kami sa seguridad po namin. Pasensya na po.
Ba't po kayo natatakot, sir? May mga bantado po sa inyo?
Alam naman po natin na hindi po bigat, na hindi po biro yung mga taong nasa likod po nito. Baka balikan po kami. Kaya hinihiling po sana namin, sana dito na lang po muna kami po.
The NBI is just awaiting the court's commitment order to know where the 7 will be detained. It also assured their safety. The other respondents who are Chinese nationals are still at large. For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, we are One News.
There was confusion earlier today over where Alice Guo should be detained. The Pasig City Regional Trial Court handling Guo's non-bailable qualified human trafficking case ordered it as status quo. Now that meant Alice should stay at the PNP Custodial Center until the court rules on the defense team's motion questioning the transfer. But the Pasig RTC Branch 167 ruling became moot and academic as Guo had already been transferred to the Pasig City Jail. Now that's based on the commitment order issued by the same court.
Kasi considering we filed our urgent motion to transfer her detention to PNP Custodial because of her threats. So nakaset for hearing siya on September 27 on Friday together or simultaneous with the arraignment. That is why as of today we will be coordinating first with the authorities.
At the Pasig City Jail female dormitory, Guo was first placed in isolation following a diagnosis of possible lung infection. After confirmatory tests, she turned out negative for tuberculosis. She is now staying at the City Jail cell number 3 with 43 other detainees. Now tomorrow, Alice Guo will be attending the Senate hearing on Pogos once again.
There was much ado over the weekend over the news that Vice President Sara Duterte had visited her predecessor, former Vice President Leni Robredo, in Naga City on Friday. We know that the Duterte camp sprang the surprise visit on Robredo as confirmed by former Robredo spokesman Attorney Barry Gutierrez himself to the big story on Friday night. Now we also know there was a person who brokered the meeting that was said to be a supporter of the Dutertes. But what's not clear at this point is Vice President Duterte's motives for the visit, which has been described by both sides as casual and personal. Robredo herself said that during the Peña Francia Festival, they don't look at political colors. Others who visited her over the weekend includes Senator Bong Revilla Jr. and DILG Secretary Benher Abalos. Still, Attorney Gutierrez, speaking to our sister program Storycon earlier today, said they can't help feeling used since it was clear that there was, quote, intentionality behind VP Duterte's surprise visit.
I'm sure intended na exactly mag-generate ng ganitong klaseng buzz, kaya nga hanggang ngayon pinag-uusapan pa rin natin. But as to her specific motives, baka hindi dapat si Leni Robredo o ako ang tinatanong doon, di ba? Dapat ang tanungin siya. Yung intentionality is purely on the side ni VP Sara Duterte, di ba? Siya ang nag-arrange nung pagpunta, siya ang nagpunta, at na-inform na lang si VP Leni nung papunta na, di ba? So, maging klaro lang tayo doon. But definitely, I mean, I don't think anybody can deny na intentional yung pagkikita. Dahil after all, hindi naman aksidenteng mapupunta ka bigla sa bahay ng isang tao, di ba? Talagang kailangan mong sadyain yun as what happened in this case. 3 araw na akong tinatanong tungkol dito. Definitely, feeling ko nagamit kami.
Debate online about this over the semantics of that visit, kung kung nalaman ba niya, surprise visit ba yun, gaano katagal ba niyaya.
The details matter because
did they clean the house for her visit?
Exactly, because we didn't even know that the two women were talking, right? Let alone one visiting the other at her house. That's a big deal.
And
so again, the optics around it is
there's
very
a middleman. There was a middleman, kababayan ni Vice President Leni, who brokered the visit, who is pro-Duterte raw.
Supposedly.
Right. Perhaps a lot to do with timing. Diba? With, you know, VP Sara being kind of in a hot seat.
And her budget being taxed.
And then the elections
Not yet. We're still waiting.
We don't know.
Well, right, you're correct. It's in plenary right now, but as of airtime, as of this minute, they haven't tackled the OVP budget as yet. It's going to go into... It's going to be a marathon hearing. It's going to go into midnight.
And they were also saying that this is being spun now by the quote-unquote DDS vloggers daw, na parang maybe there is some conflict between Senator Risa and former Vice President Leni Robredo. Maraming mga kwentong
maraming layers pa.
But one thing's for sure, you know, it definitely created a distraction from
exactly.
what has been going on
from pressing
with
other
Vice President
pressing
Sara
issues.
Duterte's political life.
That's right.
Well, up next, we will speak to Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, on de-escalating tensions in the West Philippine Sea amid Beijing's growing presence in Escoda Shoal. That when the big story returns.
Welcome back. You are watching the big story here on One News.
Well, the good news is that the government has dispatched a ship to replace the BRP Teresa Magbanwa at Escoda Shoal in the West Philippine Sea. But the bad news is it's going to take a couple of months at least to refurbish the Magbanwa. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza has the details.
It will take 2 to 3 months to repair the Philippine Coast Guard's BRP Teresa Magbanwa, which sustained holes and damage after it was rammed by a Chinese Coast Guard ship in August. From Puerto Princesa City in Palawan, the ship was brought to Danao, Cebu for repairs. It is also where 2 other patrol vessels of the PCG are being fixed following damage they incurred from Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea last month.
Itong mga shipbuilders natin, napaka-capable nito. In fact, marami na silang ginawang mga barko na ginagamit sa ibang bansa, mga luxury ship. Tiwala tayo na magagampanan nila ng maayos yung pag-repair ng Teresa Magbanwa at saka pa yung ibang mga barko nating napinsala doon sa engagement with China sa West Philippine Sea.
The PCG clarifies the repairs of BRP Teresa Magbanwa will not cost the government a single centavo. It will be shouldered by the contractor that built the ship.
Ang alam ko, under warranty pa siya. Kung tama yung pagkaalam ko, wala pa siyang babayaran. At sasagutin pa ng Mitsubishi, yung company na gumawa sa kanya.
The BRP Teresa Magbanwa was deployed to Escoda Shoal in April amid reports of China's reclamation activities in the area. The ship stayed there for 5 months but was forced to leave due to bad weather and limited food and water. Some crew also needed medical attention. According to the National Maritime Council or NMC, a new ship has been deployed to Escoda Shoal to replace BRP Teresa Magbanwa.
As we speak right now, yung inalisan ng Teresa Magbanwa ay meron tayong pinadala Hindi ko nasasabihin kung ito ay isang coastal vessel o ito ay Philippine Navy vessel. But ang pinaka-importante dito, again, agam-agam ng ating mga kababayan, bakit walang kapalit? Meron tayong kapalit.
The NMC didn't provide further details as to what ship and if it has already reached the area. So far, they haven't received reports of Chinese vessels harassing the replacement ship. Based on the Philippine Navy's monitoring, there are 65 Chinese Coast Guard vessels, warships, and militia vessels at Escoda Shoal. The NMC says it's open to Senator Francis Tolentino's suggestion to rent or lease ships from other countries to help patrol the West Philippine Sea, given that the Philippine Coast Guard has limited assets that can be deployed to sea for long periods. The Magbanwa is one of the largest in the fleet and was commissioned just in 2022.
China is testing us. That is what U.S. President Joe Biden told the leaders of India, Australia, and Japan, the so-called Quad leaders, over the weekend.
China continues to behave aggressively, testing us all across the region. And it's true in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, South Asia, and the Taiwan Straits. And it's true across the scope of our relationship, including on economic and technology issues. At the same time, we believe intense competition requires intense diplomacy. I spoke with President Xi in April. My national security advisor recently traveled to Beijing for a few weeks ago. And we see this engagement as important for conflict prevention and crisis management amidst our strategic competition.
Biden was caught on a hot mic, meaning he didn't realize his mic was still on when he was talking during what was supposed to be a closed-door meeting. He was hosting his farewell summit for the Quad Alliance in his hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. In attendance were Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, outgoing Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The worry now is that Biden's comments risk undermining the carefully crafted diplomacy by the four countries who all have insisted the Quad grouping was about more than just countering China. In the joint statement after the Quad summit, they expressed serious concerns about the South China Sea, but made no direct mention of China. So lots to unpack on the diplomatic front. Let's dive right into it. We're honored to have with us tonight Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez. Good evening, Ambassador Romualdez. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Hi, good evening. Good morning to me. Thank you.
And good morning to you, that's right.
Yes.
I wonder if we could kick off from the last news item that I just read, the Quad leaders expressing serious concerns over China's coercive and intimidating actions in the South China Sea. Although they didn't make direct mention of China, it wasn't until much later that U.S. President Joe Biden was caught on a hot mic saying that China is testing us all in the region. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, there's no question about it that China is not only testing the Quad, but also even the Philippines. Quite obviously that we're being tested almost every day in our territorial waters. But we are using maximum restraint, and the President's made it clear that we will do what we need to do in supplying especially the Sierra Madre and continue to patrol our own territorial waters without necessarily creating any conflict. However, as our Secretary of Defense said, we will continue and we will not stop because as far as we're concerned, we're doing what is right, which is what is rightfully ours.
Tell us, what was the reaction inside the room when President Joe Biden was caught or heard saying that China is testing us?
Well, I don't think there was really any major... He publicly even said it already in the end anyway, that indeed China is testing not only the Quad, but as I said, the entire world, the free world that is really very much against the kind of aggressive behavior that China has been doing in the South China Sea. That's precisely the reason why we continue to reach out to as many countries as possible into seeing our point that we want to try to resolve all these issues in a very civil and a very peaceful way as much as we can, just like what the United States and other countries are doing.
Ambassador, reports are saying that at least 20 countries plan to hold a summit on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, and one of the topics could be about China's behavior. Could you confirm that to us?
Well, I mentioned that in a forum that it is not really a summit, but more of a get together of like-minded countries to try to look into, well, one thing for sure, maritime security and maritime safety, which includes, of course, the South China Sea. And there's a very clear indication that the United Nations will be able to do that. That's the reason why the head of delegation, Secretary Ricky Manalo, will be there, and I will be also going to New York this coming week to join him. And perhaps we'll be able to move around at the United Nations to be able to talk to as many countries as possible, again, on the issue of maritime security and maritime safety.
Do we know at this point which countries are joining this side summit?
Well, that's still being worked out right now. I can't really have any clear indication. But there are quite a number of countries, as I said, who are supporting our efforts into trying to resolve the issues diplomatically, or at least, at the very least, we're trying to just simply getting countries to continue to do what they're doing, which is to really shout out some of these things that are happening in our shores, not only in the territorial waters of the Philippines, but in the entire South China Sea.
And again, the end goal for this side summit, if it does happen, is specifically to draw attention to the West Philippine Sea. Is that correct? Or is there a broader objective to this?
Well, it's not necessarily. Like I said, the broader picture is that maritime security is probably, it covers almost an entire area of the Indo-Pacific region. And these waters are supposed to be free from any kind of harassment or any kind of any country that can dominate the area. This is basically the whole idea of why we are very concerned. The concern of many countries as well, because this covers a wide range of freedom of navigation, which is trillions of dollars in trade that passes through these straits.
In the Quad meeting, was there any talk about the Philippines, and what do we stand to gain in terms of their support to this part of the region, and what does this mean for the Philippines, really?
Well, there's no specific mention of the Philippines, but the fact that they mentioned South China Sea, clearly the concern of the Quad includes the Philippines, and that is, again, in relation to what is happening in our shores. Basically, the recent incidents that happened with China. So that's a major concern for the world, because this is really will affect in the long term on how the world would look like in terms of if we do not do anything about it today, then certainly this is going to be something that the whole world will regret, because it is a major area, a major free trade area, and it's important that this place remains free and secure.
We do know that President Joe Biden is ending his term with the elections coming up. Has there been any posturing from the president when it comes to passing it down, or his foreign policy to his successor? Is he trying to have his final notes with these meetings, with these trilateral, multilateral meetings?
Well, definitely. This Quad meeting, many have told us that this is precisely what President Biden is trying to do, is to make it clearly an institution, to what we might call it an institution, because of the alliance of these four nations, these four important nations, to work together in, again, securing the Indo-Pacific region. So I think the purpose for this whole of things is, for one thing, I think President Biden is basically saying goodbye to the leaders who, like him, will probably be not in office anymore next year.
And actually, maybe the next question to that is there enough bipartisan awareness of the situation in Capitol Hill, right? Because you, Ambassador, as well, has been quoted before as saying that the West Philippine Sea might, at this point, be a bigger flashpoint than Taiwan. And so I was wondering, do the U.S. officials you speak to share that point of view?
Oh, definitely. There is no doubt that that we have, for one thing, we have a very strong bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress. I've talked to so many of our friends in the U.S. Congress, and every single one of them has expressed their major concern. They asked me, what can we do for the Philippines to be able to support them in their to secure our territorial waters? And I think that's the clear indication of that is the 500 million that was recently approved and was announced by Secretary Lloyd Austin when he was in Manila last July. So that one again is a clear indication of very strong bipartisan support, and I'm very confident that if and when any a new administration comes into play here in Washington D.C., we're going to get the same kind of support.
Speaking of help, you're right, various U.S. officials have offered to help the Philippines as far as resupply missions to the West Philippine Sea, the last one being the commander of the Indo-Pacific Command, no less than Admiral Samuel Paparo, when he came to visit. As far as you know, has the Philippines ever taken up this offer, and should we?
Well, these are Admiral Sam Paparo, who's a good friend of mine, came to Washington, D.C. before he went to Manila, and we discussed at length a lot of things that the United States can do. These are just simply just options that are being made available to us in the event of any major conflict that may, or even just to as a sign that the United States is fully committed to the Mutual Defense Treaty. I think he's had some very good discussions with not only with President Marcos but with Secretary Tudoro and our National Security Advisor Ed Año, and they've looked at all the options that are being made available to us, and it's really up to us whether we want to use that as an alternative to what's happening. But as I said, the president made it very clear that we're doing this on our own. We're doing as much as we can to make sure that we do not bring this level of conflict into something that obviously is going to be a higher tension that we're all trying to avoid at this time.
Ambassador, is it true that according to the Mutual Defense Treaty, there needs to be consultations happening before a U.S. fleet can join us in patrols over pockets in the West Philippine Sea, such as the Escudero Shoal or Ayungin Shoal? Is it true that consultations need to happen first? That's why we can't go that direction? Or are joint patrols also in the buffet of options?
Well, let's put it this way. Those are formalities that probably need to take place. But at the end of the day, the fact that we have already, both our countries have already made it clear that we are fully committed to the Mutual Defense Treaty will not really mean a lot of what we call bureaucratic tape to be able to get it moving. So it's really a question of us saying that we want to, or if something happens, and so the Mutual Defense Treaty will kick in almost automatically because it is a commitment by the United States, and it's also our commitment. And by the way, we want to make it clear that one of the things that we're doing right now, which is why we're bumping it up and the United States is helping us, being a major ally, is to really modernize our armed forces. I saw in your report the Teresa Mabanwa is one of those ships that's now being repaired. But we're getting more of these types of ships, not only from the United States, but from our friend and ally Japan and then South Korea and perhaps other countries that we were able to purchase some of these things to be able to precisely defend ourselves and be a real partner if there is going to be a major problem in our area.
Well, there are pundits saying that the $500 million support of the United States is a little bit small compared to their defense budget, and it might not be enough to give us the support we need. It does seem that it is taking time to provide us with material support out in the sea. So do we have a timeline for this? When do we start
And you know,
seeing?
we will never be able to satisfy everybody. There's always going to be somebody who's going to say that this is not enough and whatever. The bottom line is that there is commitment coming from the United States at this time. And the 500 million is just the beginning of what we see as a long-term plan for them to continue to assist us in modernizing our armed forces. It takes time to do all of these things. And obviously, we cannot absorb a large amount in one shot. So it's going to come in different phases and perhaps in the next 3 to 4 years. But at the end of the day, what's important is it is our resolve to be able to really modernize our armed forces. And I can tell you that in my conversations with Secretary Teodoro, we are really on the way to modernizing our armed forces. This time, it's going to be major, and before the end of the term of President Marcos, I think we'll be ready to really be a real partner to many of our allies and friends.
Can I just clarify one thing, Ambassador? This $500 million in defense aid, in what form will that take? Do we know?
Well, it comes in many ways. As I said, we for one thing, we have to have a clear security system, which is the foundation of the relationship we have with the United States. You know, interoperability, meaning to say that, just to give you just a small example, is we cannot be a partner in intelligence sharing if we do not have our systems working together. You know, like a technology, you have to have a system that is in place. But there are just so many of these things that we can do just to begin with this 500 million. And there is a commitment to bring this up to a level that I think is going to be very substantial. I've spoken to many of our friends here in the U.S. Senate. Senator Haggerty is one of those that is pushing hard for a 500 million yearly assistance to modernize our armed forces. So it's going to take time, as I said. But at the end of the day, we are going to be ready and able in about 3 to 4 years from now.
Right. So it could be technology, it could be military assets, not necessarily all in cash, right?
Yes, it's a whole mixture of technology, major assets that we use for our armed forces, our Air Force, our Coast Guard, our Navy, and our Marines and Army.
Ambassador, the U.S. presidential elections is happening very soon. You think this commitment from the United States would continue? As you said, it would take time, regardless of whoever wins?
Oh, yes. As I said, there's bipartisan support. And fortunately for me, I was here when President Trump was the president. I presented my credentials to him. So I did meet many of the people who work with him, and I can see that they most likely will play a role if he does go back to the White House. So that I think will give me an indication that we will get the kind of support that we've had since I've been here in Washington, D.C. And obviously, the current administration of President Biden, there is also a clear indication that those that are working in his administration will most likely, most of them, may join the administration of Vice President Harris if she becomes the President of the United States.
And then lastly, if my co-anchors don't have any more questions on West Philippine Sea, just one last very quick question, Ambassador. This has nothing to do with West Philippine Sea. I wonder if you could update us on the case of Apollo Kibuloy, on whether or not the U.S. has made any formal request for his extradition yet. Do you know?
Well, I know that they would like to give an extradition request to the Philippines. It is supposed to go to the Department of Foreign Affairs and to the Department of Justice. But however, I think the president's already made it clear that he would like to have Apollo Kibuloy face the charges first in the Philippines before we entertain any kind of extradition request. The United States, of course, is well aware of that. And since they are a friendly ally of the Philippines, they will obviously not only respect our laws, but also respect whatever it is that we would like to do as far as the cases are concerned. But not to say that this extradition request will not, it will definitely not go away. I think he has to face quite a number of cases here in the United States. And as I've said on many occasions, human trafficking and sex trafficking is a major international crime that many countries all over the world have totally been on top of it, in the sense that they really are after people who are involved in human trafficking and sex trafficking, because it's a growing concern for many countries that young ladies and perhaps even males are being kidnapped and used as sex slaves.
Right, but as of this moment, there's been no formal request yet. We're going to have to leave that there. Thank you so much for indulging us tonight. Well, this morning, your time. Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Babes Romualdez.
Up next, we'll be turning our attention to the United States presidential elections as we speak with Genevieve Villafranca Popanda, the co-chairperson of Filipino Americans for Harris Walls 2024. Stay tuned for that.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Over in the United States, the presidential race between former President Donald Trump and current Vice President Kamala Harris remains tightly contested with just 42 days before the polls. Based off the most recent poll by the New York Times and Siena College, Trump may have gained the upper hand in some states. Surveys conducted between September 17 to 21 showed Trump gained a lead in Arizona and remains ahead in Georgia, two states he lost to President Joe Biden in 2020. Harris, though, is only slightly behind Trump in North Carolina, a state that has not voted for a Democrat since 2008. Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina are among 7 battleground states where both the Trump and Harris campaigns have focused their efforts on. The U.S. Vice President has performed relatively well in key Midwestern states, especially Pennsylvania, which is crucial for her chances. However, Arizona, which Biden won by just over 10,400 votes in 2020, is proving to be a challenge for the Harris campaign, with Trump now leading 50% to 45%.
Much is at stake for the Philippines, too, as the U.S. elects a new leader in just a few months. Let's hash this out further. We have with us in the studio tonight Genevieve Villafranca Popanda. She's the co-chairperson of Filipino Americans for Harris Walls 2024. She's also a government and international affairs consultant. Good evening, Genevieve. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me today.
42 days, wow.
Right.
First of all, what is Filipinos for Harris Walls? Talk us through it.
Sure. Filipino Americans for Harris Walls is a grassroots organization. We're all volunteers, and basically we're committed to campaigning for Harris Walls to win in November. We're an organization that's been around for decades. And I think each presidential campaign, we become even more robust in our grassroots efforts and in terms of mobilizing and activation.
Grassroots, so how did it come about?
Well, we've had multiple advisors that actually used to work in the White House. And then as Filipinos become more involved in politics, especially democratic politics, the group has actually grown. I actually founded Filipinos for Obama back in 2008, and that became a model for grassroots organizing across the country for communities of color, and especially in presidential campaigns. And so every 4 years, we get together. That's how I know some of the people across the country in Washington, D.C., because we are able to come together and coalesce and actually strategize together across the country.
And it's entirely voluntary. You're not
all
being
volunteer,
paid.
Not
Wow.
Yeah, we don't get paid.
That's interesting that Do you find that there are more Filipino Americans getting involved in politics? You touched on it a little bit.
Absolutely. You know, this past August, we were in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, and we had a record number of Filipino delegates to the convention, about 50. And then we had another 50 volunteers that paid their own time and dime to get there just to volunteer. A lot of these have never been political ever before. I think it's so important to them to make sure that the Democrats win and sustain the White House, that people are just coming out and just want to get involved.
That's what the trigger is. That's where this is coming from. You think?
The trigger is that they don't want Trump to be back in the White House.
When you say volunteers, what is the campaign like in the United States, especially for Democrats?
Sure, we're actually very close to the Democratic National Committee and to the campaign, and the Filipino American Harris Waltz organization is an actual affinity group of the campaign. So there are about 14 Asian affinity groups. So there's Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, Chinese, and there's us, and we actually work together with our communities, and we basically ask our communities what are our issues and policies that that are important to us, and we actually work with the campaign, and we tell them. And so we work closely with them. We meet with them every week, and I think it's important that we have that dialogue, so that way we know that whoever we elect into the White House actually understands our policies and the issues that represent us.
I want to go to the 3 of the 7 key battleground states that we mentioned a while ago, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina.
Sure.
What is working for former President Trump in these states, and what kind of work does Kamala need to do to be able to get that lead?
So I just read this morning that Kamala is ahead in Georgia and Nevada. She just surpassed them in the last 2 weeks. And it's only by a very small margin, about 0.2, 0.3 points, but she was able to get that advance in the last 2 weeks. She's only behind in one of the battleground states, which is Wisconsin, but that's where Governor Tim Walz is from. So I think that she's doing a roadshow. You know, she's doing a good job. Her campaign is reaching out to the communities of color, and they're taking the time to get to know, the battleground states. In 2020, the margin of victory between the battleground states is 40,000 votes. So if you think about it and what we do as an organization, as Filipino Americans for Harris Waltz, in Daly City, the most Filipino-dense city in the country, has 40,000 Filipinos, right? And that's in Northern California. So imagine if all 40,000 of those Filipinos voted, that contributes towards a win, right?
Puts her over the line.
Yes. So that's why every vote counts.
Let's talk about some of the issues. Vice President Harris is on abortion. How does that affect, the mindset of Filipino voters in the States? Because dominantly, Filipinos are Catholic.
Yes, and that's an issue that we pay close attention to. North Carolina state representative is a female, and so is our state representative over in New Hampshire, Luz Bay, and she's openly Catholic and supports pro-choice, and they say that all the time. Rob Bonta, our Attorney General, very respectful of our Catholic background, but also very pro-choice. I'm also Catholic. I go to church every Sunday. I'm pro-choice. I think it's important that women decide for themselves.
But is that a sticking point? Her stance on abortion?
I don't think it is a sticking point. I don't think it's a sticking point.
But for the most part, it feels like the issues that are important to Filipino Americans have to do with the economy. Rightly so, right? For instance, every time we've spoken to some of the political leaders in the United States, they bring up issues around being able to afford housing, for instance. Right? The cost of living crisis and so on and so forth. Is Kamala going to make a difference as far as the economy is concerned? What does the base believe?
She has a plan.
to lift up the middle class, yes.
She has a plan. Yeah. She, in her last debate, she mentioned that she will, she's committed to investing in entrepreneurs and new businesses.
Right.
When you when you invest and put an influx of time and investment in these businesses, that expands their business and that actually expands job opportunities, right? And so this administration so far recently added 272,000 jobs. The unemployment rate has been less than 4% for a while now. So they show, the history that they could do that. And so I'm not sure what Trump's plan is, except for he has a concept of a plan.
Tax rates for the top income earners, I think.
For Trump or for
Kamala?
for
Trump.
Well, President Trump has said that this administration didn't really change anything from his policies on China, specifically with tariffs, that they just carried on the same tariffs over to the Biden administration. What is your take on that?
My take on that, I think we felt a little pinch based on his strategy around that during the pandemic. So in the U.S., we felt, we couldn't buy cars, right? We couldn't. There's a backlog in a lot of electronics. In Silicon Valley, one of my cousins is in that business and said, hey, do you know anyone in D.C. that could help? Because it's backlogging logistics, it's backlogging the supply chain because a lot of that's coming from China. So if you're going to put tariffs, at least have a plan of where else you're going to get the supply from, And so that's why this administration, the Biden administration, and the Democrats has invested, $50 billion in the CHIPS Act, where $500 million of that is going to go to the Philippines to expand the semiconductor business and supply chain.
Well, actually, during the debate, it was interesting to me as well that Kamala was successfully positioned herself as the candidate of change, even though in fact she is the incumbent, right? She talked about turning the page, she talked about starting over, et cetera, et cetera. Within your group, do you believe that she's just saying that, or do you really believe that she is going to be able to step away from the shadows of U.S. President Joe Biden?
I've observed Kamala Harris to get things done since 2005 in San Francisco. So I'm from San Francisco. Her district attorney platform when she was running was triggered by the death of Claire Joyce Tamponco, a Filipina, who was murdered by her batterer. She was murdered in front of her two children. And so that triggered Kamala Harris to basically change the system in terms of how domestic violence cases were treated. And so I've seen her do that. I've seen her fight, big corporations when she was AG. And what she's done, with Biden, their accomplishments together, I think she'll be able to take the best practices, but obviously she's her own person, her own platform to move forward. I think that Trump has taken us backwards.
Where do you think Kamala will face the greatest challenge in terms of being able to resonate? She is female, she is multiracial.
Sure.
Put that side by side with Trump, who is white, male, very American. Where do you think will she have a difficult time with?
Well, I think we should focus on the fact that she probably knows who she's not going to get the support from, right? Which are those that are big ride or die supporters of Trump. Where she has gained a lot of support are Republicans that don't support him and don't feel that that he represents their values. And so she's gained, I think recently, 111 Republican leaders' support. There's even, if you go to her website, KamalaHarris.com, she has Republicans for Harris. We at Filipino Americans for Harris Waltz are approached by Filipino Republicans wanting to support us and to join us. So there are many Republican organizations and individuals that are walking away from Trump because he no longer represents the Republican Party that they used to believe in.
What about the undecided on the Democratic side? Is she getting through to them, you believe?
I believe so, yes. I mean, if she's getting across to Republicans, I think she's getting across to independents. There's going to be 8 million new voters since 2020 to now, and those are Gen Zs. And a recent report shows that about 83% of them are looking to support her.
Genevieve, it's 42 days before the elections. There's reports that this ticket Harris and Walz kind of like staying away from TV interviews, print. Is that a strategy? Is that even true?
I'm not sure if that's a strategy or if it's true that they're avoiding it. I haven't heard that. What I have seen is that they're hitting the ground running and they're all over the country, including their surrogates are very busy, which makes us as grassroots organizations very busy as well. And they lean on us to say, hey, which event should we show up to, inviting us to events, and being part of the campaign, to actually be part of a campaign where Filipinos are at the table and we're able to share what's important to us, I think is telling of an organization that we hope to be in the White House. They've always celebrated Filipino American History Month in October, and they've always, they've always supported the Congressional Gold Medal for Filipinos, and so I think it's
talking about Filipinos. We actually interviewed some of them here on the show about one from the Republican Party, one from the Democrat Party, and there was concern over Kamala's policies on immigration, that she might be a little bit too lenient on possible illegal immigrants coming into the United States, and that would be unfair for Filipinos who have fought their way through the legal system to get everything according to law. I believe there's been some issue there that has also been an ace used by Trump against her about how she would treat these illegal immigrants, that it's not a crime, that we're supposed to be a little bit more humane.
Sure. I know that Kamala Harris has supported the DREAM Act and DACA, which is basically finding a path forward for children, undocumented children who came here, to no fault of their own. But she's a former, district attorney, so I doubt that she would just open the borders. And I understand that she's also supported to have a lot more border control. Some of what you hear, these policies that you hear the Republicans saying that Harris has not, done a good job or hasn't approved or haven't signed into law. If you take a look at the voting record, who shut those down? If it lost in the Congress or in Senate, it's probably because it was shut down by Republicans. And so you have to take a look at, the background in terms of, why those bills or their efforts have been shot down or have not been successful because they've been shot down by the opposition.
We're being told to wrap up, but just how excited are you at the prospect of the first female U.S. president? Well, I never thought I'd live to see this time.
Well, we've supported other candidates who are also
Potentially.
female. Correct, but we're super excited, I think, because she's also from California, represents Democratic policies, and we're just, super excited. I'm leaving here on Thursday to go back to California. I'll be in Detroit, I'll be in Las Vegas and Phoenix to knock on doors for her. So again, all volunteer, our own time and dime. That's how much we believe in her.
Before we wrap up, I'm just very, very curious because there have been 2 attempts on the life of Donald Trump.
Sure.
I wonder if that changed things around for him. I mean, what is the sentiment? Did he, I don't want to put it that way, but did that affect his voting population?
For Donald Trump?
For Donald Trump.
I'm not sure. We don't, to be honest, for us as a grassroots organization, we're not using that as a distraction. We're really just focusing on the positive things that the Democratic Party have done, the positive things that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz represent.
I do see a lot of trolls or I don't know, social media posts that have been magnified on X.
Yes.
Is that a problem also in the U.S. elections?
I don't think it's a problem. I think, I think more people are more aware about fake news. I think that the best thing to do is make sure that your information is coming from a reliable source and not just from a blog or someone who might be paid to be posting that.
But I think a lot of people struggle with that. But 42 days to go. I know
Yes.
you've got a lot to do, so we're going to
Yes.
have to leave that there. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Genevieve Villafranca Jopanda, the co-chairperson of Filipino Americans for Harris Wolves 2024.
Well, that's the show for us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
We are One News, all sides, all the time. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.